Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in today's video, I will be covering the triggers in Jenkins Job and why we are using triggers and what are the different type of triggers we have in Jenkins Job. So without getting any delay, let's get started. And for triggers, I will be creating a new job for us. So let's create that. Now there is the section right here named as build triggers, or you can just scroll down to see what are the type of triggers we have in a Jenkins job. Before getting into trigger, let me add a build step that will be like displaying some sort of text in the console so that we can figure out that the job has actually executed. So I'm just adding a normal shell command in the build step that whenever this job execute, display this message in the console log. Now before adding any trigger, let's see why we need Jenkins triggers. So let's say I have everything set up, I have my job ready, I have my build steps ready, and now who is going to execute the job for me? Because if I will be executing the job all by myself, then I could have just written some script and can be executing the same on my machine. So to execute all the build steps automatically, either periodically or either by some changes in the GitHub repository or GitLab repository, Jenkins will automatically build the project so that whatever the steps are we mentioning get executed automatically without any interference of a human being. So let's execute the job once just to make sure that it's working fine. Checking the console, and yeah, it's working. So now let's get back towards adding the triggers. Again, we have to go back to the configuration job, and either we can click directly the build triggers or we can scroll it. Now the first trigger which we have is to trigger builds remotely, and here itself it is saying that example is like if we want to trigger the job from some sort of script. So this method basically allow us to execute the job from anywhere in the world just by using this token, and this token is something which I will be defining myself. So for now, let me give it as test. Again, anytime if you are not getting like anything, you can always click on this question mark and get what exactly the option is doing in Jenkins. So in the description of this trigger, they have automatically explained that how to trigger the job by applying this option, and here is the method that we have to use the Jenkins URL. In our case, it's localhost colon 8080. Then this syntax we have to use like slash job, then slash whatever be the job name. In our case, it's test trigger. It's trigger test job. Then we are calling the build, then build of course to build the project, and then we are using the question mark token just to pass the token which we have mentioned here. And once we hit this thing from any machine, I will be doing that soon, the project will trigger automatically. Now there is another example that if the job is parameterized, then how can we pass parameter as well with this method? So we are gonna try both in the same video. So let's try this one. Let me save the project, and you can see there is only one build so far. Now let me copy the mechanism from here. Let me get back to my terminal. Is my terminal, and we will be using curl command to execute the job. So curl is basically a utility that can transfer data from HTTPS servers, you can say as of now. Now let me paste the mechanism which I have copied. Now here I have to pass the Jenkins URL and the token name. So let me copy the token name from here, and here we go. And instead of Jenkins URL, let's say in our case it's localhost. So as our Jenkins requires authentication to trigger any project, so we have to pass the username and password as well, and curl has a mechanism to pass the username and password as well. We can do that by -u flag. So -u specifies that we will be giving some username and password, or it can be a authorization token as well. So let's give it our Jenkins user name and password, and as I hit enter, there is no response in the terminal, you will see. But if you go back to the Jenkins, and let me close it, here you see that it has started the second execution. And if you click on this one and check the console, here you say that it is started by the remote host, and here is the IP address of the machine. In my case, again, it's localhost, so it's displaying the localhost IP address. Now it can be any other system anywhere in the world. Now let's try to trigger a job with the parameter using the same remote trigger mechanism. So for that we have to add a parameter, and if you do not know how to add a parameter, you can check out my previous videos hovering somewhere in the I button here or here, and let me add them here for us. Project test parameter echo and dollar is the method to just display the parameter. Let me save it. Now we have to use build with parameters instead of parameter. So let me update it here, parameters. So as I hit the same, now you will see that there will be another execution would be started and it has completed, and you can see in the console that okay, it has executed the job, but it is not displaying the parameter value because we didn't pass any default value. We can even pass the parameter value from the same command itself, and for that let me copy the parameter name. I have to pass the and symbol here instead of question mark for passing the additional parameter. For a single parameter the question mark will work, and if there are multiple we have to use the ampersand symbol. Another tip here is that if you are using the ampersand symbol, make sure you use single quote or double quote with the URL. That is to avoid the cell script syntaxing. And here it says done. Let us go here. It has started the fifth build, and let's wait for it to complete. Let's check the console, and here you see my parameter is getting prompted here that running from CLI. So this is how you can use the remote trigger to trigger the job with or without parameter from anywhere. Now let's go back to the job configuration and move towards the next trigger which we have. The next one which we have is build after other projects are built. So this basically means that we can either make downstream and upstream trigger mechanism here. So this basically means that trigger this job once an existing job execution has completed. Now it depends on us that if we want this job to be triggered after the upstream project is completed or failed or successful or anything. In my case, I already have a job named as my freestyle, which we created earlier. So we will be utilizing that to test this mechanism. So again, feel free to use the question mark if you need any help, or the comment box you will find. So hit the option. So you can define multiple trigger as well for a single job. Now I want to watch the project named as my freestyle job, and with the comma you can specify multiple project as well. Let me remove the comma, otherwise it will keep on popping up that error message. Now here are the options that if I want this project to be triggered if this project is stable, or if the upstream project is fails. That depends on us how we want it to be triggered. So let's say I want this to be triggered anytime the my freestyle job is triggered. So let's save the changes and go back to the dashboard and open my freestyle job project, and let me build this job and build it. Let's wait for the completing of this console, and it is done. And here as well you see that it is displaying that triggering a new job, trigger test job, and you can either click here or you can go back to the dashboard and click here to go back to that job. And here you see we have the sixth build as well for this one, and here it is saying that okay, it is triggered by the upstream project, and you can check the console output as well that started with upstream project, and upstream project is actually triggered by my username, so it's displaying my name here. And you can see there is no value in the parameter as well because the default value we set to blank. So this is how you can trigger upstream and downstream project. So this is how you can use a project as upstream project and trigger the downstream project based on that. Now there is another option in the post action for the same build other projects, and this will again ask you that which project you want to trigger. So if I will say trigger my freestyle job project after completing the trigger test job, it can do that as well. Now before doing that, let me remove this from here, otherwise it will get into a loop. Now in this scenario, trigger test job will act as the upstream project and my freestyle job act as a downstream project. So let me save it, let me build it with parameter, and you see the seventh execution had started, and in the seventh build you can see it is completed, and it has displaying that it has triggered the my freestyle job. And if we open this job, here you will see the 25th build, and here it's saying that okay, this is triggered by the trigger test job, and similarly in the console log as well you can check it. So this is how you can make the hierarchy of upstream and downstream triggers in Jenkins. Now the next trigger which we have is again go back to the job, go back to the configuration, and build triggers. Next which we have is build periodically. So as the name suggests that you can define a specific time to start the job execution, and this basically is used to do the nightly testing. When I say nightly testing, it means that okay, when everyone is sleeping, start the automation, do the testing so that everyone can wake up and look at the result and see what's failing and what's so again you can use the question mark to check how you can define the schedule for the same. It is pretty well documented, and there are some example as well in the bottom that this is the syntax if you want to trigger job every 15 minutes. Here is every 10 minutes in the first half of every hours, and there are other examples as well. And here are specific to time zone as well. You can define the time zone here. In our case, for the example, I will be displaying it as let's say triggering the job every single minute. So let me add the schedule here, and instead of 15, let's say trigger it every minute. I can either specify 1 here, or I can just use 5-star to trigger the job every single minute. Now let me save it, and you see it is last execution of the project is 16:24. Let me refresh it, and let me wait for a single minute, like start the project. Let me refresh it. Okay, it has completed the 8th execution, and here you see that the job is started by timer. Similarly, you can check the console as well that the job is started by timer. And this is how periodically trigger work in Jenkins Jobs. So let me disable it as of now, otherwise it will keep on triggering the job every single minute. The next one which we have is GitHub hook trigger. So here we have to do a lot of configuration in Git repository as well. Similarly, we have to add the token in Jenkins as well. It's a bit complicated, not for beginners, I would say. So if you want me to explain this as well, feel free to drop a comment in the comment box. I will be making a separate video on this because it is a little lengthy process. Next we have is the poll SCM. Now poll SCM is pretty similar to what we have in build periodically. The difference here is that it will fetch a SCM repository. When I say SCM repository, it means a Git repository. And if there is any change that has happened in the repository, it will start the job execution. Now this is something which I personally use the most, that whenever a change happen in the repository, just start the automation so that I can check the result that what happened. Again, you can use the question mark to take some sort of help. And here as well we have to define the cron job schedule, or you can say similarly what we had displayed in the periodically trigger, that you have to trigger this job after 15 minutes whenever there is a change. Let's say you want to trigger the job 1 hour later when someone merge anything in the repository. So again, in my case it will be 5-star because I want the job to be triggered within a minute as soon as I change something in the Git repository. Now here you will be questioning that, okay, where we are specifying the repository name or branch that Jenkins will look up. So let me go to my GitHub account and let me add a repository URL here, and that can be done in the source code management section. Either you can click here or scroll up, and instead of none, select the Git option here. Now here you can specify that which repository Jenkins should look, and if the repository is private, you can add your token here in the Jenkins credential. Again, the credential video is hovering somewhere here or here if you do not know how to add a credential. And you can specify the branch name or a regular expression as well. When I say regular expression, it means a pattern of branches Jenkins will look before triggering the job. So here is a temp repository I have for dumping any dummy code. And let me copy the URL from here, copy the repository URL. Now let me get back here and add it here. Here's my repository, and the branch name of course is master. You can either keep the star slash, or you can either remove these things or keep it. It's up to you. And again, these are the options Jenkins have. There are some additional option as well, that if you want to look for subdirectory changes, local branches, or those kind of thing. But in our case, it's pretty simple. Let me save it. So as of now, it has only built 8 times. Let me do a change in any of these programs. Test changes. You do not have to worry about these codes because this has nothing to do. Just only thing to worry is that I'm doing some changes in the GitHub repository. Yep, the changes are made. Now let's go back to our job and see when it will be starting the 9th. Okay, it has already started and completed as well. So if you see here, it is displaying that started by an SCM change. And if you check the console, it will also displaying the same thing, that the job had started because of some changes in the GitHub repository. And it is cloning that repository in the workspace to determine what commit had started the job. And here now there is an option named as Git build data as well. You can click here and you can see the repository URL and commit ID for the same. So this is how you can set up poll SCM to trigger your project or your job once there is a change made in any source code management repository. There is another little option which we have here, that to ignore post hook. So if the job is getting triggered by poll SCM, then it will ignore the trigger that is coming from the hook. So this is pretty much about how can you use Jenkins build triggers to make your work much easier, and I would say much automated. You do not have to worry about when to build project. You can just use any of these triggers and boom, you are good to go. If you find it helpful, feel free to share it with your friends. Thanks for watching.